Government has defended the absence of formal performance reviews for ministers amid public backlash over a proposed salary increase of more than 110,000 a year. Minister in the Presidency, Marubeni Ramakgopa, says the recommendation by the Independent Commission for the Remuneration of Public Office Bearers is not linked to individual ministerial performance. She says President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to conduct a performance review of ministers in January, the first such review under government of national unity. Well, we're joined now by Matthew Parks for further reflection on this. Matthew, good to have you once again. I mean, you've already expressed how you feel about the recommendation by the commission, but now the presidency says, well, this is not really linked to performance, but it's because of the green shoots of growth that we are seeing, but also inflation has dropped. So a above inflation increase is justifiable.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. We would disagree with the minister and the presidency. We think she's missing the point. The point is that most South Africans are struggling to cope with the rising cost of living. Most South African workers' wages have not kept pace with inflation, and government has a critical role to play. And often, many departments, municipalities, SOEs have failed to pay their role. And when workers are really struggling, we think government leaders should learn to lead by humility, lead by accountability. We don't think it sends the right message when South African workers at the post office or SABC, for example, have not received increases for several years. Many of them have actually seen themselves being retrenched, jobs being lost, etc. We think that performance has to be a discussion point when it comes to politicians, because we have about 70% of our municipalities in severe financial distress. More than a dozen at any given time fail to pay workers. Many more fail to pay pension funds, medical aids. South African Revenue Service is now raising alarm bells that many municipalities are not even paying the taxes that they have deducted from workers' salaries to SARS, putting those workers in real trouble. We're having to intervene right now as we speak with a company, a bus company, Northwest Transport Investments, owned by the Northwest Provincial Government, which hasn't paid many of its staff in the last 14 months. Medical aids, pension funds have lapsed, etc., because of this. So we think it's unfair. It's just indefensible for the minister to say that, well, we mustn't link performance to it. Yes, theoretically, legally, sure, might be not legally connected to it now per se. But morally, we have to have that discussion, because when politicians are failing, it is workers who are paying the price. It is the economy which is struggling. It is public services which are bleeding. And this very year, Parliament, including this minister, motivated for a 2% VAT hike.
Now, the argument that becomes very difficult to link it to performance, because currently the performance review process has been delayed by complexity for the past 18 months, having to draft it, take it back and forth to the ministers, have a look at it, have it approved, and so on and so forth. Now this process is only going to happen in January. So in the last 18 months, you have really nothing to link it to as far as performance is concerned. So, I mean, what essentially she's saying, you can't be arguing that they didn't perform or whether they performed, because we really don't know.
Well, we can say that many of them didn't perform. Yes, there are some, and we don't want to blacklist all politicians, for example. We can say the Minister of Electricity is delivering, we've overcome load shedding. We can say the Minister of Transport is delivering, transit is moving, Metro Rail is moving, and so forth. One can mention other politicians too. But when you look at, for example, local government, it's a nightmare. 70% of municipalities are in financial trouble. On so many other indicators, whether it's paying salaries, delivering municipal services, maintaining water infrastructure, etc., is not a good story. That's a performance failure. If we look at workers in the post office not getting paid, well, somebody has to be responsible for that scenario. If we look at these workers in NTI bus company not being paid by the Northwest Provincial Government, that's a performance issue. So yes, it might be correct that the performance agreements have not been signed yet. That's true. But that shouldn't hold water. That's a failure itself, because the politicians made commitments to South African taxpayers that we're going to have performance agreements for ministers, etc. And that should be cascaded to premiers, to MECs. It should be cascaded to mayors, members of the mayoral committees, etc. The fact that it's been kicked down the road for the past decade doesn't justify it. In fact, this point right now should be a chance to say, let's formalize those performance contracts. Let's hold politicians at all levels accountable, including the 9,000 300 councillors, etc. But let's begin to show that politicians can lead by humility, can show a sense of accountability to society. But it's wrong for politicians to constantly tell workers to tighten the belt, to tell society at large, which is really struggling, that further tax paying is a necessity, etc. But when it comes to salary increases for politicians, all of a sudden, all those arguments fall by the wayside, and politicians are united across party line. They say, no, they are struggling. We must give them an increase.
Yeah.
And to give you a bit of a feel, what a minister earns in a year is what a nurse would earn in about 25 years. What a premier makes in that single year, a police constable will take about 25 years to earn. And we need to have these kind of discussions to say, is this the kind of society we really want to be? Are we actually managing to reduce the inequalities we inherited from the apartheid regime, or are we exacerbating it? And I think right now, those are the kind of discussion we should be having. We shouldn't be just simply saying, well, politicians are struggling, let's make sure they are comfortable. Because right now, workers on the ground are battling to cope. And ultimately, it's politicians who have got a responsibility to improve the lives of already working class communities. And many of the politicians, to be honest with you, are not pulling water, to be frank.
So, I mean, the argument could be that, well, if municipal workers, which some you represent, would have received their 5-year deal, why can't we do the same for public office bearers?
Well, I think number one is that the huge wage gap between a municipal worker who barely earns enough to pay income tax, 100,000 Rand a year, for example, versus a mayor of a city who might get 3.5 million Rand. But again, many of our municipal workers have not been paid on time. We have about between a dozen and 3 dozen municipalities in the Northern Cape, the Northwest, the Free State, the Eastern Cape, which continuously don't pay staff on time. And these are normal horror shows. And you find that these municipalities, whichever indicator you take, whether it's service delivery, whether it's paying staff, paying taxes, whichever indicator you have, it's a disaster. Why should those mayors, those councillors be rewarded when they fail to perform the fiduciary duty which they're paid to fulfill? For us, that's a question that needs to be had. We've seen it time and again that many of these councils refuse to address the findings of the Auditor General. Some of the financial reports submitted by these municipalities to the AG are so abysmal that she has to reject them completely because they're completely unintelligible. So we need to have these frank discussions, and it can be easy to introduce this thing. The AG gives you a useful indicator to say, are you managing the finances properly? Are you fulfilling your fiduciary duties? Are you paying your legal obligations? That's a very simple measure to say, okay, in this municipality, these councils have done their bit, let's give them an increase. But in these ones, at Machibeng, at Tsopotla, and so forth, there's a huge problem. We need to have a discussion. We've had instances like Tembelihle municipality in the Northern Cape, which didn't pay staff about 12 months. We've had instances like Amahlati in the Eastern Cape, which at one stage was paying staff with pick and pay vouchers for 6 months. In the Free State, we're having municipal workers time and again said, well, we'll pay you every other month or pay you in 3 months' time. So we need to have these frank discussions. And I think for far too long, we've treated politicians at all levels, nationally, provincially, locally, with kid gloves. Yet when it comes to workers paying the price, politicians often are nowhere to be seen, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's a recommendation from the Commission for the Remuneration of Public Office Bearers to the President. What would be your plea or call to the President to do with this recommendation?
I think threefold. Number one is for the President to do what he's done previously. When the Commission has made recommendations which we felt are inappropriate, he has agreed with us. He has often decided to ignore the Commission's recommendations, to choose a more modest decrease. We would recommend, let's give the magistrates an inflation-linked increase of 3.5% because they are a skilled profession. We need to retain them. We don't want to see a brain drain. But I think when it comes to politicians, ideally no increase, but if he feels the need to massage a little bit, let it be a modest below inflation increase, 1%, 2%, for example, which is what he's done in previous years, which sends a better message to society that politicians will tighten their belt, will lead from the front. But we also think there's a need to review the terms of conditions of the Commission to say they must allow for public participation on this because this is taxpayers' monies. And like all other elements of budgetary implications, legislation, policy, etc., there must be public participation so the public views can be heard. And I think secondly is that they should also begin to have the discussion to say, how do we link performance management of politicians to the increases as well.
Right.
Because right now you have across the state, in the public service, in the entities, and municipalities, you have performance management agreements all the time. It's
All right.
like it's the norm in many instances. This should be also replicated for politicians as well.
Matthew, appreciate your time. Let's leave it there for this afternoon. That's Matthew Parks there, responding, of course, to the ongoing debate around the increases for public office bearer following the recommendation by the Independent Commission for Remuneration of Public Office Bearers.